Good morning, my colleagues, and good morning to the people of Guam and panelists. We apologize for our delay. We had some discussions, and I'd just like to advise that the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriations, and Housing has returned back for committee action. I'd like to mention that so that everybody's aware of it, that I've received the guidance already from the Executive Director of the Legislature, which received it from Public Health, that the body cannot convene in session until the earliest August 28th. The countdown is 14 days from the last individual found positive. So that being known, we'll be on virtual for the whole duration until at the latest the 25th. So we'll be working very hard on trying to get the budget amended and presented before the body for ratification or for adoption, and then presented to the governor. Senator, my vice chair, Senator Clint, you have a statement you wanted to make, sir?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've had a lot of discussion. I believe there's just been a lot of confusion, some differing opinions on how to proceed as far as voting and participation. So I would like to make a motion just to make it crystal clear. Now, we've had our legal counsel say that previous motions made it clear that everyone can vote and participate, but I want to be sure that it's 100% clear to everyone. So I'm going to offer a motion that's going to make it clear that everyone can vote and participate fully. Every member of this legislature can vote and participate fully in the discussions and motion makings and making of amendments. Now, that said, everyone's going to be allowed to vote on this motion that will allow everyone to vote and participate fully. I just want that to be clear. So it's clear that everyone's being allowed to participate. So with that, I will make the motion now. I move to authorize all senators of the Guam legislature to participate fully, to include, but not be limited to, making motions and voting in the formal markup and discussion of Bill 282-35 LS as substituted during this committee meeting. And I move to authorize all senators of the Guam legislature to proffer amendments with or without co-sponsors.
Do I have a second on that motion? I'm looking out. We have Senator Lee, Madam Speaker, and Senator Will Castro. Do we need any discussion? Are we all good, folks? That being said, Joe, can you go ahead and do the roll call of all the members so we can make this formal and we can move on?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the motion, Chairman San Agustin.
Aye.
Chairman San Agustin, aye. Vice Chairman Rigel.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Rigel, aye. Vice Chair Shelton.
Hungan, aye.
Vice Chair Shelton, aye. Speaker Munya Barnes.
If you can't turn on, there you go. Thank you.
Speaker Munya Barnes.
Hungan.
Speaker Munya Barnes, aye. Thank you. Senator Lee.
Hungan Sidismasi.
Senator Lee, aye. Senator Therese Terlahi.
Hungan.
Senator Therese Terlahi, aye. Senator Peter Terlahi.
Again.
Senator Peter Terlahi, aye. Senator Kelly Marsh.
My vote remains the same as it was yesterday to expand authority for participation by everybody. So Hungan.
Thank you. Senator Marsh, aye. Senator Castro.
Hungan.
Senator Castro, aye. Senator Moylan.
Aye.
Senator Moylan, aye. Senator Luis Munya.
Hungan.
Senator Munya, aye. Senator Vice Speaker Nelson.
Hungan.
Vice Speaker Nelson, aye. Senator Perez, Sabina Perez.
Hungan.
Senator Perez, aye. Senator Mary Torres.
Hungan.
Senator Torres, aye. And Senator Taitugui.
Hungan.
Senator Taitugui, aye. Mr. Chair, ayes are unanimous.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, my colleagues. Now moving along, we left off on chapter 2 on the Department of Education. If I'm correct, Madam Vice Speaker, the Oversight Chair of Education, you were left, you were still at the floor. I ask that you continue on and with your questioning. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we signed off yesterday, we were discussing the maintenance of effort and the impact of not being able to appropriate GDOE, the average sum of the fiscal years 2018, 19, and 20. And the impact would be that they would have to pay back the ESF funds. And because of that, in light of that discussion, I wrote to USDOE to ask them for clarification on this maintenance of effort requirement, and also for their federal guidelines. And so really, this is something, for me, I must have missed it. We've had hearings before, but the ramifications and the impact is something new for me to understand. And so, Mr. Chair, if that is the case, if we would have to pay back ESF funds, that's close to 41.5 billion, minus the appropriations.
You're cutting in and out, Vice Speaker.
From U.S. Department of Education and see how we can come to a compromise.
Madam Vice Speaker, one moment. You're cutting in out, so if you could just go back maybe like 20 seconds and repeat. But right now it looks like you're frozen. Hello? Hello, Vice Speaker? Okay, it looks like we lost the Vice Speaker. So with that, I want to keep moving. So let's continue on with other comments. And when the Vice Speaker comes back on, I'll let her finish what she was saying. Mr. Messian, can you check and make sure we can get the Vice Speaker back on? Senator Shelton, you had your hand raised? I'm sorry, I saw Senator Shelton first. And then Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. Of course, I want to hear the explanation from the Vice Speaker, but in the interest of time until she gets back on, I have some questions for the Superintendent, if that's okay.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, DOE, and all of our panel guests. Sujus Masi for being here for another day with us. Mr. Superintendent, yesterday we started talking about some of the utilities savings since going into PCOR 1 in March, and I know you started talking a little bit about that, but can you share with us what were the savings that were realized? And if we are to stay in PCOR 1 for longer than this 2-week period, or distance learning is to become the new way of life for everyone in the school system, what are the utilities savings we can realize, and where do you think the department will be putting those funds?
So, so the first answer to that question is that, obviously we're still tracking the bills that we're getting over the past few months, but on our first analysis, it looks like we were able to achieve, I'll ask Dr. Zenny who's also online to correct me if I'm wrong, but we were averaging usually about $1.1 million a month, and we were seeing about a 300,000 reduction in I believe that's power, just power on its own. So, kind of our estimate, in the event that we had to fully shut down our schools, then we could potentially see that type of savings on a month-to-month basis based on our average. Now, so that's based on our experience. Going forward, it would all depend, of course, power and water on the actual population at school at any one time. So as you know now, we're currently, we don't have any face-to-face instruction, but we do have some employees on campus, across the island. But again, we don't expect the full utilization of the normal power and water, usage. we don't see that full utilization. But as we get more students back, that would obviously change. So it definitely will depend on our P-Core situation. As long as we don't have many people on campus, we could plan to see some savings going forward. And then to the extent that things get better and we bring more people on campus, depending on if and when that happens this school year, then obviously for those months we would expect to see the cost rise. So I guess the answer in terms of extrapolating that, it's hard to plan against it right now because we don't know. I mean, I'm going to venture to guess that we're not going to probably come out of P-Core 1 at the end of these first 2 weeks, just based on what the doctors are saying and what they're saying on the radios and so forth this morning. That it's probably not likely that we're going to see this situation improve, that quickly. But again, if that extends, who knows what happens the 2 weeks after that and the 2 weeks after that. So, we'd like to plan for savings, but we just don't know how much of that, because on the other hand, we do want eventually to see it safe enough for our kids and our employees to eventually get back to school. And if it's this school year, then that's great. But those things work hand in hand. Now, where we would use the savings. So obviously, with the cut down to from where we were last year to what's being proposed in the substitute bill, any savings that we would see in utilities, we would hope to offset the pressure elsewhere in our operational budget, which is why we were very glad to at least maintain some of that flexibility, so that we can make some of those decisions as to where those savings would otherwise be allowed to help us with the other things that would normally go on. So if I could just give you an idea, we're really trying to boil down the essential operations of the schools in terms of those contracts that you just can't do without, or those things like the maintenance and insurance agreements and things that just won't change, versus those costs that are going to be subject to the rise or fall in population at the school. So we're doing that analysis, and again, we're probably going to need those savings to offset other pressures elsewhere in the budgets. And I'm talking about things like, our solid waste contracts, maintenance and insurance at JFK. There's some things that are just going to be built in that won't change, but we are going to look at things like custodial contracts. If we are going to be in a prolonged school closure, can we get savings there? And we'll have to go renegotiate that with the vendors themselves.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I know none of us want to be in this position longer than we have to, but it's good to keep in mind what the possibilities could be and where those savings can be reallocated to better support the students and the entire school system. So thank you. And Mr. Chair, before I yield back to the Vice Speaker, I do see her back online. If I can just ask Mr. Fernandez a follow-up question. In March, we passed Public Law 35-76. This is to authorize the power purchase agreements for the solar power use in our schools. Have we made any progress in the last 5 month?
Well, things. Right. So during our, a lot of things got delayed because of our shutdown, and a lot of the work we're doing right now is really focused on our capital, get Simon Sanchez out the door, and some of the other projects, one of them being Benavente Middle School's canopies that you've heard a lot about. And so that's our primary focus. The issue with the power purchase agreement, I'm not going to meet with my team to figure out a plan of action, is that number one is that we saw energy prices kind of dip and fuel prices kind of dip during this slowdown. I mean, this kind of economic environment. So it wasn't an immediate priority at that point to initiate any movement there. But as we get back into the school year and as everybody's reporting back to work, and DOE is still functioning even during P-Core 1, a lot of these things are still moving forward. So we did plan to sit down and figure out a strategy around the renewable energies. And the only issue, again, of course, when I said that priority level, is just because of where we were in terms of responding to COVID-19, the fact that a lot of the energy prices were falling, which we're looking at that as well as part of the environment. And then of course, as we ramp up to some level of normalcy, we want to restart that and figure out how to move forward with that process.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's totally understandable where the priorities were in these last couple of months, but I am appreciative to hear that you're still planning to move in that direction. So thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Thank you, Dr. Zenny, for the information, the files that you're providing. Mr. Chair, I do have questions if I can come back when the Vice Speaker is done.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. Vice Speaker, are you there?
Hi, yes, thank you. Sorry, my apologies.
No problem.
Just to discuss the maintenance of effort where we left off yesterday, in light of information that was provided to us, we wrote a letter to the U.S. Department of Education also inquiring the impact of the given to DOE for this FY 2021 school year, and hopefully we get a response soon. From yesterday, we believe that in order to not have any negative ramifications on the front end, which was the federal requirement that DOE should have received an average from the fiscal years 18, 19, and 20, and that average rounded to about 224 million. And so our concern is that we would have to pay back a portion of the ESF funds if DOE does not receive the average of the 3 years. Granted that in fiscal year 2018, before the Trump Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they were appropriated about 237 million, and then we had to drop down to 219 and keep a consistent figure within the following fiscal year. So now we're at 209 million, and so that's part of the challenges I think that we need to address as a body. I think also a letter to US Ed asking for more clarification on the matter because of the revenue, because of the decline in our revenues that we are seeing and may foresee in the upcoming years. So that's all I have, Steve. You know the situation, and so I'm hoping that whatever savings we can find in this budget, it goes directly to education. And we're still waiting for US DOE to respond to our letter that we sent last week.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Senator Shelton, and then Speaker, and then Senator Tello. But Senator Shelton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and for the remarks, Vice Speaker Nelson, to help us better understand, what the needs of the department are to ensure that we are able to leverage these federal funds in the best way possible. So thank you. Mr. Superintendent, yesterday you spoke about the use of the ESF and that going to PPEs for the schools, distance learning, and mental health support. Are there any plans for these funds to be used for additional training and support for teachers? I know that we're offering the mental health support to the students. Is this mental health support also going to be offered to our teachers? I'm sure you're very aware in the last couple of weeks before the school year started, we were hearing lots of concerns from our teachers who were a little bit nervous to return into the classroom and to begin the 3 different modes of education: the online learning, the home learning, and with the face-to-face teaching. So I'm just wondering what kind of support we're offering to our teachers and any additional training that we're going to be giving them with these funds.
I guess the way to answer that, so I was kind of trying to scroll down through, we have our 72-page budget of items that are broken down by schools as well as for DOE. If I could, the large, I guess the way to say the largest investment that we're making with these funds really has to do with the safety and the technology. So so that'll be I think we have about 30 $3 million of the 41 really to support, again, this is DOE as well as the charter schools, as well as the private schools in terms of the distance learning. So it includes, laptops, internet access, as well as supplies for hard copy learning as well. Normally where that would fall would really be in the supplies and the contractual, which is about, we look at about $4 million of the 41. And again, what we need for the training is really, a lot of this is materials, because we're working with behavioral health and our school psychologist teams to provide the training that we, for teachers, for all employees actually. This is part of the effort with the mental health first aid discussions that we had to try to provide that service to all teachers. And so this has really just accelerated that work. So already we've had some of that social emotional learning, social emotional training this summer, as well as in the beginning part of the school year. And we anticipate continuing that support. My guess, though, of course, I'm just trying to look at the ESF budget. The intent was that this would be continual with the partnership with behavioral health. A lot of the costs associated with the trainings really had to do with materials and supplies, that they could provide in addition to the training. So that's really the cost. It's not a high cost. And I think we were looking at, I know there were funds set aside that were being looked at by the legislature earlier to support that effort. We have consolidated grant and ESF funds available too. So those will all be able to be addressed through those various pots of funding. But the intent is to continue to provide that mental health training to teachers, not just for the students, but also for self-care. And I know that's already started. Some of that's already started as part of the preparation for this school year.
Okay, good to hear. I'm glad that we're taking care of the mental health of our children as well as our DOE team. So thank you for that. Is there anything specifically for training teachers to begin teaching online courses for the distance learning? Because I know their training going to school was, when we were not in this situation, it wasn't to teach online courses, it was to teach face-to-face, and now we're teaching them in this different mode. And so are we preparing them to begin teaching online? They're already doing it, obviously jumping in feet first and filling their duties. We're very thankful for that, but are we gonna give them more support to do a better job at it?
So we did definitely do a lot of training over the summer for a lot of teachers who were, who used their summertime to participate. And then going into the school year, we did hold trainings, which is why we extended the first week of the school year. We pushed classes back in order to provide basic training in terms of things like Microsoft, the Microsoft suite of products, Google Classroom, Moodle, and so forth to the various schools. Now, the issue, of course, is that the training to get ready for the school year needs to be ongoing. And I know we do have a lot of funding available for professional development, but a lot of that design is going to have to focus on the continuous support for the online learning component. So we did move up, I think we moved about 4 professional development days. We normally have 9 built into the school year. So we moved those up to be part of that first week. And then we're anticipating that we will continue to have use some of the other PD days to provide that training, also allowing the schools to use the Fridays that are not, where there are no classes, to be able to use some of those Fridays for continued professional development and support for the teachers. Again, I think what's good is that we do have cadres of our own employees who are very capable of leading the trainings. So, we usually sometimes we set aside money for contractors to come in from off island. We know now that that's probably not going to be likely anyway because of the traveling situation. So it's been nice to see the mobilization of our own employees, our own cadres of teachers, as well as our instructional coaches. And the instructional coaches really is a program I'm thinking about 15 or more coaches that we've been able to hire to support, our schools in terms of, curriculum and instruction. But of course, that was all based on, the in-class instruction, looking at helping teachers after doing classroom observations and so forth. This year, they've totally switched gears because a lot of that coaching is going to really have to have to be focused on these different models of learning, as well as things like the family and parent engagement as part of that process. So those instructional coaches were mobilized this summer, and this first week did a lot of virtual trainings, and we're going to really want to leverage that group to continue to do so over the coming year.
Okay, thank you. And on the same topic, I know parents are also faced with a difficult time trying to help their children move to the online learning platform. Is there any support for parents to learn about how to use the new technology so that they can teach it to their children?
Well, that's definitely a need. I think what we've seen over the first few days of the school year, I mean, to me, I'd like to say that it went pretty smoothly, based on the major shift that we were planning, plus the additional change of no face-to-face instruction at all. So we moved to distance learning, all at once. And considering the first week, even though there are areas for improvement, we did see heard a lot of good feedback from those who were able to engage, do online, as well as the distribution of hard copies. What is critical, though, is that we've been getting, we usually get the phone calls and the concerns coming, in this first week, having to do with bus transportation, and my kid missed the bus, my kid didn't come home from the bus, or went on the wrong bus. A lot of that, the traffic in front of the school, and lots of those complaints. This year, we're getting a lot of technical support questions from the parents. So what we tried to do is provide at the central office to support the schools, provide staff who are able to man phones as well, because some of the questions we're getting have to do more with, my child has his email up, but he needs to reset his password. How do we reset our password? So we're going to have to do some after the first couple of weeks, come back and really kind of analyze the type of supports that are being requested by parents. And we are planning to have parent sessions for feedback after these first 2 weeks, to really get a sense of what supports are really needed as part of this adjustment. We anticipate definitely there are going to be a lot of questions, but sometimes you need to implement first, and then the questions become more specific in terms of what the parents need. So right now, like I can tell you, emails, I was on PowerSchool, but now I don't know how to get back on. Can you help me get onto PowerSchool so I can make sure I'm getting my kids' information? Can I get on the Swift K-12 communication so I'm getting all the messages from the school? It's just a lot of tech support. So it's a completely different component. And then we always anticipated that we're going to need to design some parent training once we get a handle on the exact needs that are being expressed by the parents after the first couple of weeks of getting adjusted. So yes, the answer is yes, but I just wanted to share with you, it's a really different type of parent support. And I do want to say we're getting a lot of parental and family engagement, more than probably we've seen in prior years. Usually those are around PTAs and events and fundraising. Now it's really geared towards getting the information that they need to support their children in learning at home, and we're very excited about that. But I'm sure that the schools will be able to deal with some of that support, but I also anticipate we're going to need to provide some district level opportunities to engage parents. If we can make sure we understand what's working and what's not, we can make some of those adjustments early on instead of waiting for later in the quarter, later in the semester to try to deal with it. So everything's very fluid right now, but we do see parent engagement as a really critical part of making this year successful.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear of the collaboration between families and between the department. So thank you both. Thank you to all of our families out there who are stepping up to help their kids and do this from home, as well as all of the DOE staff, your administration, who are making it happen. And lastly, Mr. Superintendent, we've been hearing lots of anecdotal examples of the financial hardships in our community, which have made private school students transfer into the public school system in this new school year. Can you tell us if there's been a significant increase in enrollment, and how have you been able to absorb this impact?
So right now, we're trying to, I'm sure the schools are collecting that information, but we're really working with two different issues. One is looking at the change in enrollment that might be due to some of our private school students, whether they're coming to us or coming to the charters. That's a question, but we know tuition is an issue. The second issue is we are actually trying to track some of our students who are not able to be contacted. And I know that you might have seen there was an article in the paper today about this challenge. So I mean, I know all of you are familiar with this particular challenge. Is that over the summer, definitely we know our students and maybe families just disconnect from the school system because they're taking a break and on vacation and dealing with other things, and then they start to pay attention as we get back to the start of the school year as to what's new, what's different, what do we do. This summer we made a concerted effort to try to make sure that everybody, starting with the planning process, and then when we finished the plan in June, trying to really engage parents and get the word out there as to what we were doing to prepare for the new school year. And part of that was this registration for the models of learning. So we were tracking maybe about 4,000 students who had not responded at all to the PTO outreach, to the school outreach, and we had really pressed the schools to really up their efforts to make contact. What we were hearing from the schools was that for the numbers of students they were unable to contact, a lot of that was contact information just no longer being available. Phone numbers no longer working, or minutes no longer available, addresses not necessarily the same. So a lot of that we had hoped to address. We were hoping that as we came back to face-to-face instruction, that some of those families would say, hey, our kids got to go. They get on the bus, they come to school, and we start to figure out, take account of who showed up that had not been responding. And then from there, look at who needs to be further involved in our outreach efforts. The problem right now is that we didn't do any face-to-face. So we were, what we were tracking as of Monday was about 4,000 students that we were trying to get a hold of. We asked the schools, with the teachers there, and maybe they had additional information about how to reach these, the students and families, to work together to continue that outreach. And also maybe as the families started to hear that school was back in session, but not seeing any buses, that they would just take the initiative to call the schools. So right now we started at 4,000. As of yesterday, that number it looks like is around 2,500. So the numbers are coming down, but again, there's still a portion of students that we can't account for, and we have to just continue to do outreach and maybe work with the social workers and student attendance officers and the mayors to try to track down anyone we can reach. And what that means for us then is that it's hard to get the enrollment numbers straightened out, and might take a while because we might be seeing increases from some areas, but we need to account for those that we anticipated to come back but who no longer can be contacted right now. So, and I know a lot of you and others will just kind of help us think about other outreach strategies, just to get the word out in other types of ways. And that's our effort this weekend and as we go forward.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Please let us know how we can help in any way. 2,500 students is still a huge number, and I'm sure none of us want to see any student in our school system fall through the cracks or miss any more instructional time, from what happened at the end of last year. So yes, please let us know what we can do. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Sheldon. I have a simple question before I recognize the speaker. Mr. Fernandez, the maintenance of effort, that was mentioned earlier, and I read the letter. What does it impact? Is that every single federal grant you got?
No. So the maintenance of effort was specifically applied to the ESF grants that were given to the outlying areas. And that includes the $41.5 million that was given to GDOE for the public, private, and charter schools. And that also applies to the $12.5 million that went to the governor as well. So, when we provided that information, again, it's not really clear, right? I mean, in terms of how this will all play out, there is a maintenance of effort requirement, and it gives a basic way of calculating that baseline, looking at FY17, 18, 19 support for elementary and secondary schools, as well as for the higher education schools. So it gives some of those parameters, but it also give some flexibility to the state or, to Guam to look at different ways that might be calculated and expressed to demonstrate maintenance of effort. I assume, of course, that other states are going to have the same issue and have the same questions. It's just that we haven't heard yet of any success, because I think the process was supposed to begin in September for reporting and monitoring the ability to meet these maintenance of effort requirements. So I know that the Vice Speaker sent a letter to Secretary DeVos. We already sent a letter, our request to the program office for guidance on initiating a waiver request. I think in the document you were sent, there was a frequently asked questions that talked a little bit about what the requirement was, what the consequences are, and what the process would be for a waiver application. But we're too early to understand whether we're going to get a lot of flexibility, when that will happen, and given that there's a national election taking place, how one administration to another might review that request. We would hope for a lot of flexibility, but I just wanted to make sure that in this forum that we explained what we were seeing in terms of the requirements, so that you understood. I've also reached out to the governor's office as well, and I understand that they are going to be looking at that as well, because it applies to the governor's $12.5 million as well. And I'd love to be able to have a more unified approach to how we address, the request for waiver and flexibility. It would make sense that there would be a unified demonstration of maintenance of effort versus, different approaches to that. The challenge I have at this point is that I, like the Vice Speaker mentioned, I'm waiting for a response. Among the consequences that were stated, and it's not, among the consequences, the most serious consequence in my view would be the requirement to pay back the federal funds that are being used. And we have, with 41.5, we have already gone out and purchased PPEs. We have ongoing procurements to be able to continue purchasing those PPEs through the rest of the school year. Again, assuming that we're going to have some face-to-face contact and have employees on site as well. In addition to that, we have a major procurements for the technology. And so I will be reviewing and hopefully hearing back, hopefully some guidance from USAID, but there is a decision to be made about whether or not we should continue to obligate and expend those funds without a response. I don't think a DOE would be able to, on its own, pay back those funds if that were the consequence. Now,
All right.
we want to be optimistic that that won't be the consequence. There'll be more of a widespread need for the flexibility, and that US DOE would understand that. But it's too early to know what that result will be.
All right. And the only reason why I was asking that, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. John, is that the maintenance of effort is referring to the percentage, am I correct, of what the government must contribute? Or is it just generally the 41 million you're talking about? And if you're talking only about 41, John, is there anything else in the grants in DOE that impacts the maintenance of effort?
My understanding was a couple of things, is that that there is some flexibility in how a state demonstrates maintenance of effort. It says the average of 3 years of state support for elementary, secondary, and post-secondary. It gives some flexibility, and I think that's where the numbers folks need to get together and think about what would make sense in making that argument. So it says the average of 3 years of state support, but it does say that the state can look at different factors. We definitely cannot count federal funds that were received by the department as part of that maintenance of effort. I think there are some clear exceptions to what can be used, but but again, with regard to defining state support, it does allow for some wiggle room for the states to try to make a determination as to how to make the best argument that flexibility is warranted and that maintenance of effort is met.
All right, John. I just wanted to make sure that my colleagues and the people of Guam understand that, because I'm in full support. I want to find you some funds. And Madam Speaker, you had something that you text me that you wanted to maybe make a motion or something that we can try to find a way to help DOE.
Yes, definitely, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and based on the presentation that the good Vice Speaker presented and the resources that were needed, and also the presentation from Mr. Fernandez, it is, for me at least personally, very important, very key that we at least go back and reconsider going back to chapter one on revenues, and literally getting to this body to accept a baseline proposal of what budget numbers that we are going to be working with. It's really important as we look for the education, health, and safety of our people of Guam. It is important that we at least know what numbers we're looking at moving forward. And just with chapter two alone, the request to make sure that the funding that is provided today needs more resources. I think it's important that this body please consider going back to chapter one, since all of us are included in the participation, and be able to look at and get a consensus of what numbers we are going to accept on the revenues. And I'm hoping, Mr. Chair, and this August body, that we consider that motion. And if I have to put it in motion form, a motion to reconsider going back to chapter one, so we can vote on the number that we will be actually working with moving forward.
Yeah, I don't believe we need a motion to go back to one, because we never closed one, because we were still debating the revenue base, and I think all the body, my colleagues will agree. We only identified from BBMR that you increase in this part, increase here, but we never voted on or considered a vote to adopt any amount. And we want to be able to support DOE, because what I'm concerned about, and I'll ask OFB to comment before we go back to chapter one, Madam Speaker, is that we understand maybe a definition, and maybe even some other folks from the administration will explain maintenance of effort. Where else does it impact? Because I know DOE is important, but if it impacts throughout the government of Guam, we need to be mindful of that. So if my colleagues will just bear for a minute, and we'll ask the OFB to comment, and maybe even let me see, is Lester on, or would it be
Mr. Chair, if I may add just one other note, based on what's happening already and what is presented, I'd like to give an example of what one of the other government agencies are doing, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the point that was sent to me by some parents from the PBS University, and it has been very helpful in their efforts to educating and teaching our students and our community here. I understand that PBS is ascertaining grants, and I wanted to see if DOE is engaged in any of that. And just kudos to PBS for thinking outside of the box and looking into opportunities to engage in this modern technology and moving forward in educating our students. And that's why that brought to mind bringing back us to chapter one.
All right. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleagues, well, I'll ask OFB, Mr. Guerrero, and I'm looking, maybe DOE can also chime in, DOA, correction, can chime in on the definition and the impact throughout the government of Guam of the maintenance of effort. Because I do want to recognize DOE. They're the first chapter two. They get first dibs, basically. But I want to make sure that we all understand as we try to increase or consider where we're going to get funds, we all understand what we have to deal with. Steve, I'm trying to see what happened to Steve here. Joe, can we get Steve back on? He disappeared. There you go, Steve.
I'm here, sir.
If you can go ahead and explain your understanding, because you're a former BBMR anyway. You can tell us about what maintenance of effort is all about, and then we'll get DOA, Mr. Byrne, to comment also on what the impact GovGuam White it would be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, for clarification, I'm sure that, Mr. Fernandez has mentioned that the MOU requirement for GDOE is supposed to be based on the cost of administering both the elementary and secondary level education. My familiarization of the MOE is the maintenance of effort is normally, it comes in different forms for various grants. It's not necessarily hard cash. It comes in the form of in-kind, you can come in the form of personnel services. There's different ways how a state and territory can come up with the MOE requirement for a grant. Now, specifically for DOE, my understanding is just, I believe it's whatever the average is for the last 3 years. We need to come up and make sure that we have that amount of money available in the local coffers to match or provide some sort of either financial assistance and or in-kind or whatever the case may be for MOE grants that DOE administers. Now, my experience back during my time with the Bureau of Budget is MOE, again, like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be hard cash. And it just depends upon the program and the requirements of each of these grants. So there may be some programs out there, some departments right now that, based on the level of funding that we provided in the bill, may be tinged on being jeopardized simply because we didn't provide sufficient funding for the program. But my understanding also is that on the MOE, we will get the grant, and whatever local funds are available, they can probably spend up to the level of the grant, as long as it's matched by the required MOE. Typically, most grants require that the MOE be secured even prior to the execution of those federal dollars. But I am aware in the past that they can probably spend up to the level of federal dollars that can be matched with local dollars.
Okay, let me get DOA, Mr. Byrne. Do you want to comment on that one? Because we're getting ready to go back to chapter 1. Ed?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch what was being said.
Okay, what we're discussing, Mr. Byrne, is reference to the maintenance of effort.
Yes.
DOE has that requirement, and I don't know if every other agency in GovCom or who else has that impact. And if you can explain, if you're familiar with it, if you can explain it, I would appreciate it.
Yes.
Steve has already made an explanation, so.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to leap in on this. I wasn't aware of this issue until it was raised by the superintendent, but it obviously does affect both the direct grant to DOE and the grant to the governor's office. And there's a formula, but it also says the secretary may waive the requirement for the purpose of relieving fiscal burdens on states that have experienced a precipitous decline in financial resources. Those are rather stirring words, or rather disturbing words. But at this stage, since it covers 2020 and 2021, I don't know that we're in a position to really take a position on the whole thing. We have to see indeed what transpires in those 2 years. That kind of wording is the wording that I see popping up in all the CARES Act type of legislation for all types of grants and things that are going through.
All right, thank you, sir.
Chair?
Yes, Mr. Fernandez, sir.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the explanations given. I think, as you mentioned, Steve is familiar with maintenance of effort as a requirement of other types of grants. In this one, I did include, and I hope will be shared. I know this was included in the previous correspondence earlier in August, but again, this is a document that really does focus directly on with guidance for the CARES Act maintenance of effort questions that have been asked. So starting at question 4 through 12 really is a focus on how the states might approach the demonstration of the. And again, it does give some flexibility, also includes the opportunity to waive. This is a requirement that was included both in the grant documents that were provided to DOE as a state education agency, as well as to the governor's office. So it applies, to both grants. And I have been working with Ricky Hernandez to try to figure out how to address this in lieu of the current budget. But again, there is some flexibility in how the state might want to determine that it either has met the requirement or else to request a waiver. And Mr. Byrne is absolutely correct about this language in there about the waiver being available due to a precipitous, I believe that is the word, precipitous decline in state revenue. But of course, it doesn't give quite a definition for precipitous. So I'm guessing it'll allow the state to make that argument that the revenues meet that requirement. So
just for the record, it says financial resources, not revenues. And
all right, okay, we have financial resources.
Your guess is as good as mine as to what that means.
Right, and I focus on the word precipitous because, again, the precipitous is in the eye of every state, I'm sure, in this situation.
All right, thank you. Being that there was a request, Senator Tello, ma'am, okay, is it in reference to going back to chapter 1 or we're still in this discussion? Okay.
I'd like, we have DOE here right now, and
That's
we're
correct.
all given the opportunity to speak to them before we go back to chapter 1. We're already on a roll, and a lot of us have questions for DOE, and I'm asking that we continue on with DOE, and then we can go back, because then we're not clear at this point exactly how much in need for DOE is in need of for us to go back to chapter 1. So if we can continue on and get the gist of what's happening in DOE from all of us, I appreciate if we can do that first, and then go back to chapter 1.
All right, okay, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands that the only amount that was not offered, but that was mentioned in chapter 1 on page 2 was the 2 million in let me see real quick, just to bring everybody so we all understand. And the way I read the letter from DOE is we're looking at DOE short 16 million, but the only thing we're looking at is a total of 7 million in the front of revenue to increase. So there'll be still a shortfall. So we need to bring clarification of exactly how the MOE is going to be met at DOE and how the government can justify it's met already, and then we can move forward. But I agree, Madam Speaker, we'll hold back on going back to chapter 2, but at least it's so noted that you asked to go to chapter 1 correction, so we can address the revenue. But as we're moving forward, we're going to find out. Yes.
Chairman Joe, with all due respect, please, it is really important. I understand that education is here, and I understand that also law enforcement and health are important, especially since we're in this public health pandemic. I really think that it's important that we go back to the revenues now and that we work on it. I understand that DOE is already requesting for resources, and know that if any of their budget it's already cut. If it gets cut or we don't provide those resources, then we are not going to be doing them any justice, and they will be harmed. So I think it's important that we take time to go back to chapter 1.
Understood, Madam Speaker, but what page are we on, Madam Vice Speaker, there on your DOE? Are we still on, what page are we on now, Madam Vice? Where's the Vice Speaker?
Mr. Chair, we were in the presentation in the beginning.
Okay, so we're still in the beginning. And I need to remind everybody, and I can understand where one of our colleagues is asking that we go to these.
Yeah, and Senator Manny Shelton, point of information, and Senator Manny Shelton had the opportunity to question DOE as well. So if we can have the opportunity for all of us senators to continue on, it would be helpful for us to determine, how dire need of Department of Education is. It's important to all of us. That's why we're here.
No, understood, Senator Tello. I'm in agreement with you. I just wanted to know if we moved anywhere from page 1, because I've read the whole chapter for DOE. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands where we're at, and as we're moving along. And we identified the shortfall. And as the speaker brought up, there's safety, there's health. 7 million cannot stretch so far. So I just want to make sure everybody's mindful of that. And based on the letter of maintenance of effort from DOE, it's actually short 16 million. So based on that letter, 7 would help, but it's not enough. So that being said, before we go back to adjust, and I understand where the speaker's coming from, to adjust the revenue base. We have not closed chapter 1, my colleagues, we have not. But we need to understand, and as we complete DOE, which is the largest agency, and then we have to anticipate public safety and health and everybody else. There's only right now 7 million to be added to the budget that could be added. And where we're going to get the other funding to take care of everybody else will be all driven based on all the amendments and everything as we move forward of anybody that comes up with an MOE. Okay? Are we in general agreement? Senator Tello, so I think Senator Shelton, you are done. And we'll proceed now and we'll hold back on chapter 1. We're going to make sure that we're going to address that. My colleagues, we are going to address chapter 1. Keep in mind, we will adjust that when we complete DOE and the understanding of the possible impact. Because all right. So moving along, I think it was Senator Tello. You were next, right? Unless Mr. Vice, yes, sir.
The vice speaker's been trying to get back in. I just want to make sure she's on. She sent some messages and I don't see her unless she just got on now. So if you could, if we could make sure the vice speaker is let back in.
Yes.
She said she was in the waiting room.
Okay, Joe Mesgun, make sure you let her in.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have been admitting her. We're not sure if she's just getting kicked off on her end, but she's not showing again at this time.
Okay. And folks, it's 12:08 right now, so we just keep moving along for maybe another 22 minutes, then we'll break for lunch. We'll do a recess and then come back, okay? We're just waiting for the vice speaker, so we make sure the oversight chair of that agency is participating or at least listening on what we're doing or what we're discussing. And then Mr. Vice, after Senator Shelton, it's now Senator Tideway, right? Because we're bookmarking. We're not going to miss out on chapter 1. The speaker already asked for that. One of our colleagues asked for it. We will go back to that, but we want to continue asking questions because John's probably going to ask for the total 16 million, and I don't blame him. John's not looking up, but I understand. Is the vice speaker back on? Ma'am?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, Senator Tello, please. You're on the air, ma'am.
Sujus Masi, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity, and buenas, my colleagues, and also those who are participating. Superintendent Fernandez, thank you so much for sticking it out with us here and giving us that information. It's quite alarming to find out about the MOE, but it's also comforting to know that there may be some flexibility. And right now, you can even tell us the calculations to determine, the MOE right now. And you did send a waiver, as well as the oversight chair sent a request about a waiver with regards to the MOE. And we still don't have any of that in play right now. So I'm sure that we're not going to jeopardize anything moving forward. So Mr. Fernandez, there was one. Mr. Byrne, you mentioned earlier you were quoting something in the MOE on a requirement. I didn't catch exactly something about resources, financial resource. Can you repeat that section that would give some kind of flexibility or question? Can you state that again, please?
Yes, Senator, it's on page 11. It's under a paragraph headed Maintenance of Effort. It says the Secretary may waive the requirement in subsection A, which is the requirement you're discussing, for the purpose of relieving fiscal burdens on states that have experienced a precipitous decline in financial resources.
Okay, thank you. I'll just write that down because I don't have the page 11 in front of me, but I appreciate it was much more clear to understand what you were saying. And we all know that all the states are having this difficulty, and whatever CARES Act that was given to education, they're all under the, I'm pretty sure they all realize that we're all in a financial disarray right now. And so I think hopefully, fingers crossed, that they will grant us that waiver. Regarding the SEF, Educational Stabilization Fund, Mr. Fernandez, it was a project narrative that was created on July 29, 2020. Has there been any changes to that spreadsheet that was issued on, it was dated July 29th? Has there been any changes since?
I'm just trying to, I'm just trying to make sure that, okay, so we're looking at the application that I also provided. That's the latest application that we have before US DOE that they have regarding our budget for expenditure of the funds. So that's the official document, yeah.
That's the one on July 29th, 2020?
It's July 29th, 2020, right?
Yeah. And there hasn't been any change at all to that list?
No, these are the things that were, this is what the request was and was approved by US Ed. So it was a requirement for us to send and approve this before we could go forward and expend. And then of course, as we move through, we will, if any adjustments are needed, they would need to be subsequently, guided by US DOE.
Okay, for instance, the CDC required a thermal scanning of a population of a school of 1,000 or more to require that from CDC on the scanner. And I believe there was 9 purchased for those particular schools. What about other schools? Even though it is under 1,000, we don't have such a huge population like in the mainland on their schools. We have a lower population, but still the ability to have these thermal scanners in all the schools might make better sense. That's why I was wondering if there's been any change to that. But then again, considering, we're not face-to-face and students are not coming into school right now, and it may be that way for a while, but have you looked into providing these scanners for all schools?
No, I mean, what we've done is we obviously have been guided by the CDC guidelines and are trying to meet the requirements that it would allow for us to open and enable us to support all the schools. So based on our discussions with the schools and with our budget, in terms of our budget, we are providing the thermal scanners for the head scanning thermometers. And then, like you said, for the schools of a certain population and above, we are purchasing more of the thermal scanners for multiple people at one time. So that's what we're currently purchasing. And the head thermometers have already come in. And I think we're waiting for delivery of the thermal scanners, I believe, by the end of this month.
Okay. The last question I had, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity again, is that I noticed on the spreadsheet that textbooks hard copy of $5.589,528,000 was spent for hard copy material. Now, usually every year you're given $1.5 million for textbooks. And now with this funding that's coming in, a lot of the ESF funding went to textbooks this year. Is that right? 5.589 that you spent?
Right. So right now, typically we get 1.5, and part of that is also shared with the private schools. And so I know we discussed this yesterday about whether that was being utilized according to those requirements. And I clarified yesterday that the current FY20 textbook money is being used and should be expended to purchase textbooks. With the ESF funds, I think I mentioned yesterday as well that one of the things that prevents us from using the consolidated grant funds to do things like textbooks is because number one is that the textbooks are a mandate from our local law in terms of the Adequate Education Act. And in the consolidated grant, there's a supplement but not supplant provision that prevents us from funding things that are already local mandates. With the ESF funds and how we got to this MOE discussion is that there isn't a supplement, there isn't a supplement but not supplant provision. So it allows us more flexibility in being able to materials like textbooks that we wouldn't otherwise have in normal federal grants. But again, in lieu of the supplement provision, the maintenance of effort provision is what is required. So it did give us flexibility in being able to address that need for the coming year. So yes.
Okay, that was good news. When I saw that the spending was headed toward that direction of additional hard copy textbooks for those individuals who don't have the means to have internet service or anything like that would go online, it's very helpful to know. And I appreciate all you're doing, Mr. Fernandez. I definitely, it must be very difficult in your shoes right now to try and, yes?
And no, I just wanted to echo that in terms of the fact that these ESF funds are here for COVID-19, they definitely will support the hard copy learning model for those who don't have immediate access to the internet or computers, even though we do want to see more of our kids have that access and be able to go online. But what's good about it is that even after we here and hopefully after a vaccine comes in and we're able to move on, we can still have those materials as well. We really wanted to use the money in ways that would address this year, but hopefully be sustainable in providing support in years to come. So that was a good opportunity for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, take care, wash your hands, and be safe. Thank you so much for what you're doing for our children on Guam. Thank you, Zenny.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Tello. Does anyone else want to ask DOE a question? Otherwise, we're gonna move to chapter 1 and let's end that. Senator Therese.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I thought the questions this morning were very good, and yesterday's questions also very thorough. So, but if I could just clarify then, so it looks like the maintenance of effort amounts, those can be discussed further, I guess, whether it's actual cash versus resources and what those amounts really are. For the 3 fiscal years, and I'm glad that Mr. Byrne chimed in on that that we can all work together on this. Of course, we want to ensure that we keep this grant, or that we keep these funds. So I appreciate your concerns, Mr. Fernandez, and but I'm also hoping, of course, as my colleagues mentioned, that we get the waiver. And so I hope that that's where we can all work together, because at the amounts that we are cutting the entire government of Guam budget, it just doesn't seem likely that we're going to be able to put, huge amounts back into DOE. But the good news that I thought I heard yesterday was that the chairperson did a very good job of assuring us through OFB that that we are providing for teachers and enough teachers. We are providing in this budget for, your flexibility in hiring these limited terms also. And so I'm very glad to hear. And yeah, I share the sentiments of my colleagues that these teachers are overwhelmed. I mean, this is something they've never had to face. And it's, I give you and them all the kudos to try to work this. I'm so worried about these students who we're going to lose touch with because of this situation. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that this morning, that you are working towards that. And it seems like everybody's trying to do work that's not what they signed up for, including you, including the teachers, and especially the parents and the students. It's just difficult all around. So we want to do whatever we can to support you. I'm also hoping maybe if we could just clarify one thing, Mr. Chair, if the OFB could tell us if the maintenance of effort is based on percentage of budget, how does this budget compare to last year if we use percentages instead of amounts? So, for example, is DOE's percentage of the overall GovGuam budget similar? At least for the 1 year. Do we know that amount? Do we know that? I know you mentioned that earlier, Mr. Chair. Am I still on? Yeah, did you hear that? Oh, it's Mr. Guerrero. Yeah, if I could ask you that, yeah.
Okay, your question is, you want to know what percentage of GDOE's budget is of that of the entire budget?
Yeah, if for example, we gave GDOE a certain percentage of the overall GovGuam budget last year. Is this year's similar in percentage? What we are giving to GDOE by this substitute budget?
What is the percentage? Right now, Senator, of course, they are receiving slightly about a $10 million decrease. That percentage would reduce. I believe right now, I'm doing the percentage calculation. On the, yeah.
All right then. Well, I'm sure that, yeah, Mr. Byrne and the superintendent and you will work together to come up with a way to argue that we are, you know, close to maintenance of efforts, as close as we can be under these circumstances. And if it's not close enough, then yeah, we're arguing for a waiver. And so I'm hoping that we can be successful at that. I had a few other questions about the other parts of this chapter, Mr. Chair, just very quickly, like, for example, the Simon Sanchez procurement. It talks about, we're going to give another, it says 500,000 for owner's agent engineer and engineering, architectural and engineering services. But I was looking at, you know, some of the other appropriations that we've made, and it's so in beginning in, let's say, 2018, there was a 1.5 million, and that was for owner's agent engineer, architectural and engineering services and other related services for Simon Sanchez. And then there was in 2019, fiscal year 2019, 1 million for the owner's agent engineer and the A&E services. And then in FY20, looks like the same purpose, OAE and architectural and engineering was 500,000. And now we're appropriating again 500,000. So I just wanted to know, have all these amounts been used for these purposes, or were they used for other purposes? Or right. I also thought that the governor announced that she had also given an additional $1 million to cover something that you needed during FY20 for the Simon Sanchez. So I'm just curious about that amount, Mr. Chair.
May I answer, at least give an update? So, Senator, may I answer that?
Yes, please. Yeah.
I know where you're going with that. Is I'm trying to piece together the various funding supports and authorizations and so forth. And of course, for us, that's also been a challenge to make sure we keep track of all of that. What I can say is that it is our commitment to get the, you know, we were very far along, and I don't want to get into anything further in terms of the actual procurement, except to say that we hope to complete it before the end of the fiscal year. And if that's the case, then that support, you know, might be used for other purposes or reprogrammed. I mean, I think the intent that looks like it was to continue to support us in the event that we needed to maintain that funding and it didn't expire or so forth, you know, from last year. But what we're hoping to do is complete this process and get it awarded before the end of the fiscal year. So my understanding, and we appreciate it, was that funding would just kind of be, ensure that the prior 500,000 from last year didn't expire, or at least was able to carry over in the event that we needed it. But all I can say is that we are right now, we are just trying to finalize certification of funding so that we can close out on an award and move forward to start the design work. And hopefully what that will mean is that we can come back and start talking about the next stages and not, beyond design, which would be construction and financing.
Oh, okay, that's great news. So, Mr. Chair, maybe I would make that motion for OFB to adjust the wording of this provision so that it's a carryover of the 500,000 from FY20 as opposed to a new 500,000 for that purpose at least.
Senator John, are you saying you don't have the 500 and you don't need this 500? I mean, what is it you got?
What I think one of our earlier concerns is that if we get past this fiscal year, then some of the funding that was already set aside for Simon Sanchez might expire. And we can work with Steve to kind of clarify that concern, but our intent is to get this done
Okay.
before then and not put that
Okay,
at
no,
risk.
no, then I understand that. Thank you, Senator Therese. That's something that, what we'll do is, because before we close DOE, we want to tweak that motion so that we can reflect that for DOE specifically. If not, put it in the miscellaneous, the carryover of the 500,000 from 2020. And I think that's what you're leading to, right, Senator Therese?
Yeah, yes, something, yeah, yes.
All right, and then we can, then we'll make sure we so noted. So as we move through the budget, when we get to the portion where we have to add it on, I think it's an administrative or miscellaneous, we'll ensure that John doesn't lose that, DOE doesn't lose that. I want to see Simon Sanchez build. I'm from Jigo. Folks, it's 12:27, and I wanted to go back to chapter 1, and so we can settle that. And I don't know if we'll be able to get it done quick, but I want to make sure that we'll recess until 2 o'clock, and then when we come back, we will go specifically into. I see your hand, Senator Sabina. We'll go straight into the into chapter 1, and let's address that funding revenue so that at least we all will know. I mean, whatever direction we're going to decide, the amendment be to increase or not. That's really what's going to come down to. All right,
Mr.
So,
if I could just continue DOE then before we go around.
Okay, well then you'll be able to continue, but understand, my colleagues. Okay, we're running on a clock. I just don't want us to. We want to make sure that everybody gets a shot. I see Senator Sabina, Senator Pito. So why don't we recess until 2 o'clock, and then we'll be running the clock on exactly how much time everybody has, so we can keep the communication going. Everybody will ask the questions, and we can keep it going. All right, John.
This is
We'll see you all.
DOE.
Yes, sir.
DOE will be back at 2 o'clock.
Yes, sir. Because we're not done. Unfortunately, we're not done with you yet, John. We still want to ask you many questions, and with Zenny. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you all at 2 o'clock.